Evening, folks. It's 6:07, and this is your closing comment for today, Thursday, the 18th of January. And I'm trying to make them shorter so that there'll be more viewership. It won't take as long for you to go through them. Okay, let's start with the futures. The oil bounced exactly the way that we were talking about it. We're in the XLE. It recovered today. It was down yesterday and the day before because stocks were lower, even though the oil had clearly bounced back to the upside. I can only point this out repeatedly. Every time it gets down here, you get a reversal and it looks terrible. And if you look at it on the weekly, it really looks terrible, but it got below the 200-week moving average and turned right back up. Let's remember, it's been below the 200-week moving average at least a dozen times, but it has not closed below it once since it came to the upside through it back in 2021. So I'm kind of pleased with that. As far as the rest, we had the grains slightly higher. Nat gas was down another 8 cents. Remember, this is now the March. Doesn't relate exactly to the February that we were following before this. Gold bounced, was down to 2007, was down to 2011 last night. But today bounced higher. It's still not anywhere near out of the woods. Silver was up slightly. Um, Stocks were higher. I'll get to that in a minute. The dollar was up, supported by lower bonds, higher yields, stronger dollar. Bitcoin 40,880. I'm going to point this out again because this is getting into the area that I was talking about as an area that I would consider buying it. All of this. We still have this gap between 39,650 and 40,220. If we could close that gap, I would be all over this. It is rolling over. The spacing in between the short and the longer term MAs in the MACD is about at its maximum here. And so I expect it to roll down. But I got to say, there's definitely going to be room for a bounce here. I mean, we were 49,500. Now we're barely 40,000. I'm looking for that to reverse. Okay, as far as stocks go, um, we had a very strong turn today. We had both housing starts and permits and claims, unemployment claims, come in dramatically better for the economy. That kind of cancels out the idea that we're getting six Fed cuts, although I've never been a fan there. But the markets did turn back up. Dow was up 201 or a half a percent. NASDAQ was the leader, up 1.35% or 200.03. The S&P was up 42. The Russell was up 10.5, and the Dow Jones Transports, they were actually the leader, up 258.27 or 1.7%. We had Apple recommended by B of A with a higher price objective. Apple closed 188.03. That's up 536 or 2.9%. We also had good movement in the semiconductors. Taiwan Semi reported and beat, closed 113.03, up 10.08 or 9.8%. And on the strength of that and their earnings, SMCI, same situation. It actually closed 311.44, down 674, currently trading 338 and a half, up 20. So $27 move from where it closed at 4 o'clock to where it is now after the earnings, up 6.4%. Discovery Financial, DFS, talked about it last night. Um, it had gone from 108.74 down 92 to 101.14 on the earnings, down 8. Well, it continued even further today. Last trade is 97 down 11.74 or 10.8. And last but not least, we have iRobot. This is kind of interesting because um, when they announced their deal with Amazon, the stock moved higher. But in point of fact, it only moved from about 29 or 30 up to about 42. Um, 6 days ago, there was a conversation that Amazon might walk away from it. And the stock went from 37 all the way down to 29 and closed 29 and three quarters. Spent the last 4 days going sideways. And now the EU comes out after the close tonight and says, we're going to block it. This is something I just don't get, that the EU can block two American companies. But that's better left for another day. What's interesting to me is that the stock just collapsed. Again, I remind you, the stock went from 30 to 42 when they announced the deal. Now it's gone from in the 40s down to 29, and then again 6 days ago from 32 to 27. Today, after this announcement, the last is 1420 down 1334 or 48%. So the stock is selling at half of what it was selling for before the announcements. So that's a tough one to swallow. All right, folks. Tomorrow morning, we don't have anything before the open. What we do have is 10 o'clock December existing home sales and January University of Michigan consumer sentiment. So we'll see what those look like. Have a good evening.